We often measure great leaders by, how much power they accumulate, the scope of their vision, or maybe the size of their organizations. But what if the enduring test of leadership isn't about how much power you hold, but about how willingly you submit to it? We're diving into a really crucial topic today: integrity. And according to the stack of sources we analyze, integrity, that inner strength we all want, is not a default setting. It is strengthened or catastrophically shattered by one single factor: accountability.
Exactly. And that's the big reframe here. Our source material challenges this common idea that accountability is just a necessary evil, a set of handcuffs designed to slow you down.
Yeah.
Instead, they position it as the leadership amplifier. It doesn't constrain growth. It actually multiplies your trust, your credibility, and your influence. So our mission in this deep dive is to move past the abstract idea of just being a good person and to really unpack how intentional, practical structures, the architecture of accountability, can transform integrity from a fragile virtue into a daily, enduring practice.
And this works for leaders across business, government, ministry, all of it.
All of it.
Because that's what's so critical no matter what field you're in. The leaders who last, they don't just rely on raw willpower. They build systems that protect them from their own human fallibility. So we're going to walk you through those specific systems today, rooted in principles that are, well, truly timeless.
Okay, so before we even get to the architecture, we need to be really clear about what we're protecting. I mean, what is integrity, really? We tend to equate it with simple honesty, telling the truth on a tax form or in a contract, but the source material gives us a much deeper, richer perspective.
Wait, so if it's more than just honesty, what is it? Can a leader be technically honest but still lack integrity?
Absolutely, that's the critical distinction. Integrity goes way beyond just behavioral rules. It speaks to an inner coherence, a wholeness of character. You can be legally honest, but still have divided loyalties or hidden agendas or wildly inconsistent standards. And the linguistic root is so telling. The Hebrew word that's often translated as integrity is tom. And tom conveys these ideas of completeness, soundness, blamelessness.
Completeness, so it's like being all there.
Exactly. Nothing hidden, no part of your life compartmentalized off from scrutiny. The sources point to Proverbs 11.3, suggesting integrity isn't passive. It's an active guide, an internal compass that directs a leader's path and ensures what they project on the outside matches who they are on the inside.
That idea of wholeness is key, because if integrity is wholeness, then the main threat isn't some sudden ambush, it's internal drift. And here's where it gets really interesting. The sources say integrity rarely crumbles in a single big fall. It erodes. It happens through subtle shifts and slippery slopes. It's cumulative.
So if internal drift is the enemy, what are the subtle warning signs? What should we be looking for?
Well, they outline several classic erosion points. Think about decisions made in isolation, right? Where you skip the checks and balances because you assume your own judgment is flawless. Another one is ignored feedback, especially when it's critical feedback from people below you. And then there's the biggest one, the one that justifies almost anything. Believing the greater good of your mission allows you to bend a rule or shade the truth.
The ends justifying the means.
Exactly.
And history is, well, it's sobering on this. The sources give the really stark example of King David. His failure wasn't just a moment of lust. It was a moral cascade, a total collapse. It started with inaction, staying home when he should have been at war. That led to temptation, that he actively concealed his actions, and finally he committed murder to cover the whole thing up. It was explicitly a series of escalating moral failures, where each small compromise just made the next one easier. It shows that even the most principled leaders are vulnerable without robust external checks.
Okay, so let's stop relying on willpower and start looking at the architecture. If integrity needs constant work, the sources say we have to build intentional systems. And they distinguish between external, the guardrails, and internal, the inner compass. Let's start with the guardrails, the external structures. There are three main categories. First up, mentors and spiritual directors. These are intentional, often asymmetric relationships. The historical pattern is so clear. Moses had Jethro, Paul discipled Timothy.
And for our listeners in, say, business or government, you can see this role as an independent executive coach or a trusted advisor. Doesn't matter what you call them. The function is the same. The sources stress that this person must courageously ask probing questions, challenge assumptions, and confront potential areas of compromise. They're there to tell you the truth no one else wants to.
Right. And then next we have peer accountability, which works horizontally. This is that iron sharpens iron principle from Proverbs. This model needs mutual trust, shared values, and crucially, getting past the superficial stuff.
Yes. The value here comes from asking specific, difficult questions to uncover blind spots. We're not talking about, hey, how's your week going? We mean questions like, where have you been tempted to cut corners this week, either in your budget or your ethics? Or maybe, what decision did you make this month that you hesitated to tell your spouse or your team about? The specificity is what gives it teeth.
Finally, within these external mechanisms, you have organizational oversight. This is the formal architecture. The thinking behind it is from Proverbs 15.22, which talks about having many counselors. So this means formal structures like independent boards, dedicated audit and ethics committees, and using 360-degree feedback systems where leaders get reviewed from above, below, and from their peers.
That's a huge point. If your character isn't being measured right alongside your competence, your organization has a major structural weakness. Okay, so now let's turn inward, because lasting integrity relies just as much on self-discipline and cultivating that inner compass. External accountability can force the right action, but it's the internal work that transforms the heart.
So what are those practices? What does the source material recommend for cultivating that inner life?
They focus on things that intentionally disrupt the day-to-day chaos. This means carving out real solitude and silence, giving yourself space to listen to your conscience, or, for a faith leader, the promptings of the Spirit. It also includes things like journaling about specific struggles and temptations, and reflective practices like regular retreats, just getting away to honestly assess where compromise might be creeping in.
And speaking of that inner nudge, the sources highlight the ultimate internal mechanism, the conscience. For people in faith-based leadership, this is often described as the Holy Spirit's role in conviction, like it's referenced in Galatians.
But the principle is universal, even if you connect it to broader ethical leadership. Whether you call it the Holy Spirit or just your internal ethical barometer, the critical thing is to respond quickly when your conscience pings you. You can't maintain that inner coherence if you consistently ignore that voice. You justify small compromises until the moral muscle just atrophies. Prompt response is paramount.
For a really comprehensive masterclass in how to combine all of these elements, the sources point to Nehemiah. This is a fascinating case study because his accountability centuries ago was so multi-layered. He was accountable to God, to the king, to his people, and to his peers.
And Nehemiah's accountability to the people. That provides such powerful, relevant lessons for modern leaders. First, transparency. When he got to Jerusalem, he openly presented his vision to everyone. He didn't operate in secret. He sought buy-in and exposed his plans to scrutiny. Second, justice. And this is where it got really challenging for him. He didn't just hold his enemies accountable. He publicly confronted the economic injustice from his own wealthy allies who were exploiting the poor.
That must have been a massive political risk, alienating his biggest supporters.
Huge risk. But he convened a great assembly to expose it and fix it. He put organizational justice ahead of his own personal or political convenience.
And the third point is the highest form of accountability, leading by example. The sources note he refused the standard governor's allowance. He led through self-sacrifice. He made sure no one could ever accuse him of enriching himself through public service. He held himself to a higher standard than he demanded from anyone else. So, if you're leading a team or an organization, the practical action item here is to implement accountability partners and to do it the right way. The sources stress choosing a partner with maturity, proven integrity, and, this is crucial, the courage to speak truth to power, even when that power is you.
And for your organization, structurally, integrity check-ins are non-negotiable. This has to include values-based evaluations and 360-degree feedback in your performance reviews. And you need formal whistleblower channels and clear confidentiality policies. These aren't just compliance burdens, they're safeguards for the organization's soul. Now, as we build these structures, we have to look at what tries to tear them down. The sources analyze the two biggest threats. First, the danger of overestimating your own self-discipline. This is what fuels the Lone Ranger leader myth.
But wait, don't we see examples of successful, isolated leaders who seem to move faster because they don't have to wait for board approval or consensus? Does the source material address that perception that interdependence just slows you down?
It does. It acknowledges that perceived efficiency of going it alone, but it insists that short-term speed never, ever outweighs long-term catastrophe. The sources lean on Lord Acton's famous line, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." If you believe that the human heart is fallible, Jeremiah 17.9 says it's deceitful above all things, then the Lone Ranger model is basically self-sabotage. It's completely antithetical to the strength that comes from community.
The second major threat, and maybe the more insidious one, is avoiding uncomfortable conversations. This is the peril of silence, and the cost of that silence is exponential. It leads to the erosion of trust and the normalization of compromise. What you tolerate eventually becomes your new standard.
Yes. And the sources give a really sharp emotional warning on this with the example of Eli the high priest. Eli knew his sons were committing severe abuses, but he only gave them a mild talking to instead of taking decisive action. His failure to confront was a failure of leadership, and it led to severe consequences for his entire family. Inaction is a profound choice in itself.
So, what's the antidote to that silence?
The process of loving confrontation outlined in Matthew 18 is presented as the template. That's right. It emphasizes starting privately with the goal of restoration, not punishment or public shaming. And if you have to, you escalate by involving others, but the aim is always restoration and truth. Courageous confrontation, when it's done in love, isn't just about maintaining the system. It's an act of integrity preservation.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? When accountability is intentional, when it's woven into the fabric of your life through peers, mentors, self-reflection, it stops being a burden. It truly becomes the leadership amplifier, resulting in multiplied trust, credibility, and influence that actually lasts.
The final takeaway is simple. Leadership that endures isn't built on rugged independence. It's built on strategic interdependence. A leader's integrity is amplified not when they show how strong they are, but when they actively seek to bring their own blind spots into the light. The highest form of strength is shown by a willingness to submit to the very structures you yourself help to create.
The sources ask a crucial question for you to mull over after this deep dive. Who holds you accountable when ambition starts to blur your judgment? And more specifically, think about the accountability system in your life right now that depends solely on your willingness to be honest. And ask yourself, how could you make that specific structure feel safe? Go build your amplifier.